I let my friend take credit for my work for months until I got my sweet revenge. I'm still reeling from what happened. It feels like a scene ripped right out of a thriller, but it wasn't a movie, it was my life. Let me take you through it. I thought I had the perfect work buddy, a guy who seemed like he had my back. Dorian and I started working together about a year ago, and at first we clicked instantly. We were both driven, ambitious, and had this unspoken competitive energy between us that pushed us to excel. I thought he was the type of person I could trust. I couldn't have been more wrong. Everything started off fine. We'd collaborate on projects, brainstorm ideas, and everything felt like teamwork. But over time, I noticed something weird. Dorian began taking more and more credit for the work that I was doing. At first, I brushed it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then it happened again and again. Small things, like when we'd pitch an idea to the team, and suddenly, Dorian would be the one presenting our idea as if it was all his own. I'd suggest something during meetings, and somehow he'd manage to twist it into sounding like he came up with it first. It was subtle, but enough for me to start feeling like I was invisible. And here's the kicker. Dorian knew exactly how to play the game. He'd ask for my help on certain tasks, my insights on ideas, and then turn around and present them as his own. It wasn't just about taking credit. It was about making sure I was stuck in the background, unseen and unheard. I remember this one time when we were supposed to present to our boss, and Dorian was soaking up all the praise like he had single-handedly saved the company. I was standing there, silent, barely even recognized. And the worst part? Dorian had the audacity to pat me on the back afterward and say, "Great teamwork, huh?" That's when it hit me. He was playing me. The whole time. But here's where the story takes a turn. I was pissed, obviously, but I didn't want to be the kind of person who just reacts. I wanted to be the one who pulled the strings. So, instead of confronting Dorian right away, I decided to sit back and watch. I was going to use his own arrogance against him. I had to get smart. Over the next few weeks, I started tweaking things, just subtly. I knew Dorian was going to take credit for whatever I did, so I figured if I was going to get nothing, I might as well make sure he got something less than perfect. I'd drop small hints in reports, little errors he'd never catch. Nothing huge, just tiny, easily overlooked details that would mess with him if he wasn't paying attention. And knowing him, I knew he wouldn't. The real magic happened during the next big project. We were working on a presentation for a huge client, one that could really make or break our department's reputation. Dorian was already hyping it up, acting like it was his baby, and I was over here rolling my eyes. He was too smug, too confident that nothing could go wrong. But here's where I decided to hit him where it hurt. I slipped in a tiny but important error into one of the financial reports, just a number that was slightly off. Not enough to be noticed immediately, but just enough that someone like our boss, who paid attention to every little detail, would catch it. I had no doubt Dorian wouldn't notice it. He'd gotten so used to coasting by on other people's work that he'd become careless. The day of the presentation arrived. Dorian strutted into the room, fully confident that this was going to be his moment. He started presenting his work, and I sat there, trying my best to act normal. But the moment arrived. Our boss paused, staring at the financial data on the screen. "Dorian, can you explain this number?" he asked, his voice calm, but with that edge that made everyone in the room freeze. Dorian started stammering. I'll double-check it after the meeting," he said, clearly flustered. But the damage was done. Mr. Larson didn't let up. "Can you explain how this was calculated?" he asked again. Dorian was stumbling over his words, clearly trying to cover up his mistake, but it was obvious. He had no clue what he was talking about. I could see the panic in his eyes, but I kept my poker face. The entire room was watching him struggle. He fumbled for answers, but nothing he said made sense. Everyone could see it. Dorian didn't understand the work he'd been pretending to do. He'd been riding on my coattails for so long that when the spotlight finally shone on him, he cracked under the pressure. The worst part? He couldn't even blame anyone else. This was his mistake, his moment of truth. When the meeting ended, I stayed behind to pack up my stuff. Dorian stormed over to me, his face red with anger. "Did you mess with the report?" he growled. I could see the fury in his eyes. He had no idea how to handle being exposed like that. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "What are you talking about? It's your work, isn't it? You've been taking credit for everything I've done for months. What's one little mistake gonna do?" Dorian went silent for a second, his anger boiling over. "You can't do that to me. I'm not letting you get away with this." I smiled to myself, feeling the tiniest bit of satisfaction. "I didn't make you look bad, Dorian. You did that all by yourself. Maybe next time you'll actually know what you're talking about before you try to steal the spotlight." After that, things changed. Dorian's little facade started crumbling. People began to notice that he wasn't as infallible as he pretended to be. And when he tried to take credit for a new project, people started calling him out. They started questioning him, and honestly, it felt like karma was finally catching up with him. But here's where the twist comes in. A week after that disastrous presentation, I was having lunch in the break room when my boss, Mr. Larson, sat down next to me. He looked serious. "I need to talk to you about something," he said. "I know you've been doing a lot of the work around here, and I want to make sure you're getting the recognition you deserve." I was caught off guard. Was he about to fire me for what happened with Dorian? Was it because I hadn't spoken up before? But then he dropped a bombshell. "Dorian came to me last night," he continued. "He admitted that he's been taking credit for your work. But here's the twist. He was planning on leaving soon. He'd been talking to another company, and he was going to use your ideas to pitch to them. He tried to sabotage you, but instead he dug his own grave. We have a strict policy about intellectual theft here, and that was the final straw. He's been let go." I was speechless. Dorian had tried to play me like a fool, but he had underestimated how far I would go. Not only had I exposed his incompetence, but I had also unknowingly saved my own position and ensured that I was now recognized as the true talent behind the projects. And the best part? Dorian thought his ego could carry him through, but in the end, he was the one who was shown the door. The company respected me more than ever, and my work was now acknowledged for what it truly was. In the end, I didn't have to lift a finger. Dorian's arrogance was his downfall, and I ended up getting the recognition I deserved without even asking for it. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is watching someone dig their own grave without them realizing it. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to catch all the exciting stories.